All right, so thank you everyone for tuning in, whether live here now or later on when you're watching the video. My name is Pearl Ann Porter. I'm the artistic director of the Pillow Project and here at the Space Upstairs. And I also teach improvisational dance and modern movement at Point Park University for the past 20 years. So I've always been interested in camera work. I've done a lot of filming of my work over the past 16 years here with the Pillow Project, with all different kinds of cameras and situations and different types of work. And creating work for the camera has always been something I've really been interested in. And I slowly just started making work like this over the years. It wasn't a big decision to make work for the camera as much as I realized what the camera can allow that a performance watching it live cannot. So a big question I get from a lot of students all the time is, well, how is dance for the camera or dance for film different than recording a work, that might be for the stage and it's done, filmed kind of creatively? And from my perspective, it is very different, because if you're creating a work for a proscenium and you're creating work for a proscenium and you're allowing for a camera to sort of free wander around that work, it is inherently kind of evident that that work is meant for a stage. And yes, you're creatively letting the camera get some close-ups that an audience member could not, and move around. And I'll show you some examples of this later. There is definitely a creative way to show performance work on the camera. That's very different than really treating the work you're making as being specific for the camera and not specific to work that was meant to be on a stage. So you have to start thinking of the stage as your framing and as your lens. So when you start thinking of this as the stage, and the stage can obviously move and shift and be edited together and have things either non-sequentially, you can get all kinds of crazy creative with, backwards and slow motion footage, just to name some ideas, and that's not even getting into effects. What we're gonna talk about today is how can you shoot more effectively utilizing the phone or the camera that you all have, which is on your phone. This camera, this is an iPhone 11 Pro. Now, granted, this is the most current camera that you can get through Apple. But honestly, every iPhone I've had up until this one has always been the best camera I've ever had. And I've had access to really awesome cameras. My phone, utilizing my phone and thinking creatively about how I work with that footage, that is superior to having a great camera that has like a wonderful lens, but not knowing how to use your eye. So today, what I want to focus on is utilizing the phone or the camera on your phone as your primary shooting device. And everything I've been shooting for the past, I don't even know, like 6 years at least, has been exclusively on my phone. And that's kind of what I'm going to share with you today. Some of the things that I've learned of how to make it look professional, how to get the things that you need to get, how to utilize your phone like a real camera, because it's a real camera. It's a fantastic camera. 10 years ago, this camera would be unthinkable. And some things about how to plan your shoot and tips of how to use your framing, like little hacks, and we'll go through some footage that I have of past pieces so I can show you examples. So let's get started. So the reason why I am a big advocate for using the camera on your phone is because you always have it with you. And therefore you can always be working on how to utilize it better. You don't need to go out with a big shoot and get your camera and all the bags and batteries and equipment. You have your primary shooting device with you all the time. So you want to get good at shooting with your phone as your primary camera device. And the best way to do it is just shoot a lot. Like, you want to shoot a lot. So what do you want to think about when you're shooting? Before we get started, always make sure that your camera is completely charged and you have ample room on it to store a bunch of video footage. I am going to speak from experience that has bitten me in the butt many times, that I thought I had footage. I thought it was fully charged and it wasn't. And the worst thing in the world is to be on a shoot or to be doing something that, you know, you've planned and you're like on 5%. That sucks. It sucks. So that is first and foremost. Two, I I really like holding the camera with a little something on it. I've gotten really used to the case that I always use for my camera, so I don't have to worry about taking it in and out of the case. And from my experience, having more than just this little square to hold on to, having something more to put your hands on like this has been really helpful. I can also feel when I'm going over the lens by accident. I can utilize a wider hand on my phone. This matters. You're the dolly, you're the gimbal, you're going to be the primary device of how the camera is going to be maneuvering, especially as a dancer. Holla, you're going to use your plie. But you want to be able to have a nice hand on your camera. I found that when people hold it like this, which is how you see a lot of people take photos, especially like on vacation, and they have this like 2 finger on each side mode, that's terrible. Don't do that. You want to have a lot of hand on your camera so you stabilize it. So what I often think of is keeping my elbows in and treating my whole body as an extension of the camera. So instead of moving my arms around, I keep it close to me. All right. So this is much harder to get a stable shot. I want to keep it close to me. And I use my body facing, turning around to be able to make my camera movement smooth. This is a big deal because when you're utilizing your camera very far out like this, your phone doesn't weigh a lot. That means the shaking of your hand is a huge factor. And yes, the phones have a little bit of stabilization nowadays, but not nearly enough to compensate for an outstretched arm. You're thinking about getting it far away from you. You're not taking a selfie. All right. So you want to think about keeping it really close to you. And the hand I like, and you got to experiment with this a little bit. I like keep steadying it with a finger on each side. All right. And then I utilize my fingers all the way down. I brace the bottom with my thumb. There's a lot to hold on to. And my phone is always in my case. So I don't have to think about, wait, I want to shoot something and taking my phone out. That's not necessary. For years, I was self-conscious of this. I felt like I'm just taking things with my phone and it didn't feel serious. But if I shoot seriously, I don't care what this looks like. I'm not going to build a little box around it to make it look like a camera just because I'm worried it looks like I'm just doing some amateur stuff with my phone. If I take it seriously, the product is all that will matter. So holding your camera is a big deal. You want to make sure that you're using your whole body as a way of stabilizing your camera. And when I say that you're using your plie, oh, I mean it. Like if you want a low panning shot, and we'll get to different shot types in a second. When I use my plie really smoothly, I can get such a beautiful crane shot, you know, that you see in like these old movies, or rising. I have really engaged my core or my abdominals. If you're on a floor that is smooth, shoot with your socks on. Don't shoot with your feet because you can take a much more gentle step when you're trying to move around. Your feet are naturally able to slide a little bit so you can get a long panning shot. So instead of doing that with my arms like this, I keep it in and I think about shifting my weight really smoothly and slowly into a nice lunge. This is dance with the camera. All right. So that has been very helpful to me. You don't need a tripod. You don't need any fancy equipment for your camera. You don't need a gimbal. Those are all nice things to have, and you can definitely utilize them. But for years, I never owned a tripod that would hold either my other camera, which is like this gigantic thing, or my phone. You can get one of those little claw arms, and that's super helpful. But I've often braced my camera with a book or a shoe. That's 100% able to work just as effectively. It might take a little longer to set up, but with some gaff tape, you can basically tape your phone to anything. You can maneuver it to anything. So handheld shots are important. Handheld shots would take practice, but also if you want to set your phone for a static shot, what's around. You absolutely, my phone kind of nicely sets itself up sometimes if I just put a shoe behind it with the case on it. But of course, you don't need any special equipment. You just need the lens. That's it. All right. So thinking about how you're going to utilize your shots. There's a couple different kinds of shots that you want to think about because that's going to help you with your planning. And when you're on set, what do you want to make sure that you get? All right. So in film, in normal filmmaking, there is the zoom in and there's the dolly in. Dolly is, you've seen old films or current films, and they have like the railroad tracks and they have a camera on the tracks and there's like some a grip that's just pushing the camera along the tracks, and the cameraman is static in a seat, but he's being physically moved. So the camera is being physically moved in space. It could be a side shot, it could be like going toward the subject. That's called dolly in, or like dolly out, or however. Zoom is done in camera. All right, so everyone's camera has a zoom. I do not recommend zoom for your camera phone because the zoom is not a manual zoom, it's an automatic zoom. So it's a mechanical zoom, and it often looks really mechanical. It looks like a phone. The phone reveals itself in many different instances, and that's definitely an instance where the camera phone reveals itself, is when a zoom is done. It is much more effective with a camera phone, in my opinion, to physically walk in if you want a zoom, or to physically be moving around slowly, than to zoom in your camera. Use the actual lens. Now, this iPhone 11 Pro Max has 3 different lenses. It has a close-up lens, it has a wide shot lens, and it also has a normal lens. I use the normal lens and the wide shot lens more than anything else. The zoom lens, if you zoom in, even though the quality is good, you're far away, and every little shake of your hand is just magnified. So I don't find that's like super effective. If it was on a tripod or like a static shot, perhaps, but in my opinion, always doing it manually with the camera moving toward or away from the subject is always best. So yes. So you also want to shoot horizontally. I cannot stress this enough. If you don't want your work to look like it was shot on a phone and screaming such, do not record this way. That angle, that perspective, that dynamic, the size of your frame is exclusive to a phone, that portrait mode. It looks like a phone. Shoot it horizontally, and your work will have a much more cinematic widescreen perspective. It elevates the quality of your work for sure. So shooting horizontally, thinking about you physically moving your camera where it needs to be moved in the shot. If it needs to be up close, if it needs to be like really up close, your camera, you behind the camera, is going to be very close to the subject. And as a performer, that's a thing. We're used to the audience being very far away. When the camera is up close, that's something that you and your subject or whoever you're shooting needs to be comfortable with, and to be able to approach your subject in a way that doesn't distract them from the work, but they have to be mindful of it. So always move in, away with your physical person, meaning take the camera to where you need it to go, and shoot horizontally. Your work is going to be elevated that much more after doing that. So now getting into some camera specifics, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen with you. So Zoom is great for some things. Zoom is not great for thinking about camera cinematically. So it's only going to show me this way when I share my screen with everybody. So I apologize about that, but you can be able to see what I'm going to try to do here. So here we go. All right, now I am sharing my screen with you. All right, and I'm going to go into my camera mode just because I want to show you some things. So here I am looking at everyone. All right, here. I'm going to go into video. All right. And like I said, I can't shoot sideways because it's going to do that, and that's like super annoying. So imagine we're not in portrait mode. See how it looks like a phone? All right. So if I'm shooting here, all right, and I have all of this bright windows behind me, What is important is that you want to exposure balance and autofocus your camera. All right, because on your phone, your camera is naturally set to, I'm sorry, it's naturally set to auto. You want to lock it. So you want to lock the exposure and the focus on your camera. And how you do that is, I know this is with iPhone. I'm pretty sure other phones do this as well. So I'm going to take the brightest thing in my, my field here, the windows behind me, and I'm going to touch it. See how everything dimmed? It's because it's assuming that everything needs to be balanced to that, meaning the most bright point in your field of focus, like the most bright point in my shot, it's going to balance it. Now, if I go to the ceiling above it where it's dark, well, let me go to a little wall piece here. All right. So if I autofocus to the wall, all right, and now if I autofocus to the windows, it darkened a little bit, not much. All right, let me see if I can get a little better example on the screen here. So, there we go. I autofocused my little square. I just touched and held it. It autofocused to the whiteness of that screen. Now, if I go over here and I think about the darkness, hang on, I think someone just, okay, I got to admit someone. There we go. The darkness of my screen, all right, I am going to, the focus changes. All right. Touch here. So that's a dark point in my screen. And now the light point in my screen is going to balance everything a little differently. So now I'm focused. I'm going to focus on the word delete right there. Hold it. See AE/AF on the top. That's auto exposure, autofocus lock. All right. That's, you want to lock it. So now when I move around, it doesn't change. Notice how I'm moving around here, and the colors and the brightness balance are generally the same. Yeah. Now, if I don't do that, and I'm going to take it off that, now if I look at the windows, or if I look at my screen, see how it's changing? Look at the background, how much the background changes. It's all over the place. So if my subject is moving around, it's going to constantly try to adjust what it's looking at the entire time. All right. And my windows are kind of blown out. If I touch the windows, that's much better. All right, it's more realistic. Now it made more shadows. So if I want to take things not so shadowy, look at my screen here. Oh, now it's blown out again. My windows are blown out again. And I want to change it again. I'm going to focus on that little fan in the window. Look at all that detail. Look at all that detail. So something that's really common with cameras is that we don't think about the autofocus and the auto lock. You want to make sure that wherever your subject is, that you get the desired effect that you want. And sometimes if you just auto lock on something bright or something dark, it's very different. See, I can see all that more detail on my screen because it brightened up the screen. But now if I go to the windows, it's blown out. So I want to autofocus on the windows. But look how dim my screen got. And my screen is not in focus, all right? Because I'm concentrating on the fan in the window. If this is my subject and I want to focus on that, my screen is much more in focus and it's much more clear, but look at the fan in the background, it's fuzzy. So you can, especially if you have depth of field, you really want to focus on what you're looking at and touch it, lock it, and then continue to go and experiment with this. If you have something backlit, you're going to get a much different thing if your subject is lit from the front. Experiment with this on the site. This is a little bit of filmmaking 101. What's the exposure and what is the focus? So don't just point and shoot and like start recording. Take a minute and figure out what the lighting you want. Now, iPhone makes it super easy. You don't have to worry about f-stops. You don't have to worry about shutter speed, none of that. You can easily change that with the camera. Now, so here is my wide shot. Very nice to use on the iPhone. Here's the normal shot, and here's the close-up shot. So you could see my hand has a lot more shakiness to it because it's zooming in for me. I don't want that, all right? Here I'm gonna go to normal, and it's a lot steadier. And if I go wide, I'm going to time lapse. We don't time lapse. It's even steadier. The farther you are from your subject, the steadier your shot is going to look. All right, so let me stop sharing here. So things to think about. All right, so Now getting into planning your shoot. And this is the big thing that I think catches a lot of people by surprise when they first get into shooting. Things take longer than you think. All right. The rehearsal process may or may not be shorter. The amount of time that the dancer is going to be working on a piece. I mean, I do a lot of my stuff on set. Like I work with people that understand how I want to work. We've talked about the idea, and a lot of it's live directing on the set. But people tend to really underestimate how long it takes to film something, because unless it's a piece that's done straight out and you're just doing creative filming in the studio about it or in the theater, shot to shot to shot takes some time for setup, for making sure that you curate your environment, getting the lighting right, trying things many times because maybe the framing isn't what you want it to be, and all that kinds of stuff. There is a rule that I always plan. I think about how long it was going to take me to shoot it, and then I double that. So if I think it's going to take me a half hour to shoot it, it's at least an hour of work. If I think it's going to take like an afternoon, it's going to be all day. So it's best to always plan too much time and expect that, because then there's a realistic expectation with your performers, and there's a realistic expectation with you, and you're not rushed. Because the worst thing that can happen on a filming set is that if you feel rushed or you got to do something really fast, you're not going to get the shots you want. You're not going to take the time to set it up. And you're going to feel that you need to just kind of fly through it. And then you're going to get home and look at your footage and be like, dang, you know, I wish I had that shot. I wish I didn't do this. Oh, I really needed them to do that again. I wasn't paying attention to that. So you want to plan your shoot. And the lovely part nowadays about phones is that you can look at the footage you just took. These are what in the film industry would be called dailies, where they would shoot all day on film, they would, you know, rush to develop it, and then the director and the editor and whoever, cinematographer, would sit down all night usually and watch the dailies, like the stuff you shot that day, because they have to make sure they got what they needed, that shot was okay. When you're in the middle of shooting, you don't pay attention to a lot of details that you can when you're just looking at it. Look at your dailies as you're shooting. Don't wait to look at all that stuff afterwards. You want to be checking, especially when you're new at this, you want to be checking what you did. That makes a big difference. Treat that as part of the creation process here. So expectation on filming, be realistic about time, scheduling, and also look at your dailies. When you're scheduling, this is not like a rehearsal. It's not where people, you know, I have rehearsal at 3 o'clock, show up at 3 o'clock and like everyone rehearses and you're done, that's it. If you're shooting on location or a location specific for filming, whatever you're doing, you want to have some time to be on location before you start shooting. So many times I'm on location, I show up somewhere and be like, ooh, we need to move that. Or, oh, we got to pick up some trash here. Or, oh, that's not going to really work now that I'm looking at it and giving myself some time. If you don't have time to get to your set beforehand, like days before your shoot to kind of scope it out, get some shots, get some ideas that you're thinking about, you want to make sure the day of filming that you get there in advance, because there's always something, whether, oh, that car's parked there that's never been there in its life, and now we have this huge car in the shot, or I need to call security over here to see if they can take care of, you know, this door over here, whatever it is, get there early. So make ample time, be there early, and always make sure that you are prepared for the anomaly. All right. So schedule time, storyboards. All right. Storyboards are really important for filming. And I dropped mine on the ground here. All right. So I wanted to show you an example of a storyboard that I made to make sure as the filmmaker that when you're on set, you get the shots you want. I am all about improvising when you're on set. That's a cool shot. Try that shot. Like that's fun. But when you're thinking of a film that you want for the camera, there are some shots you need to get. All right. There are some shots that I have to make sure I get this shot because of something else that's happening later, or this shot needs to be this featured thing. And this, like, you want to make a list of shots that you absolutely need. It doesn't have to be in order necessarily. It's helpful for your eyes, but like the piece I just am working on right now, I meant to get a bunch of different shots and I'm going to arrange it in an interesting way in post-production. So my little storyboard kind of looks like this, super primitive. It's just squares. I can kind of see like this is a shot of eyes. This is someone sleeping in a bed. This is someone by the mountains. This is someone turning. This is someone getting up. There was things that had to make sure that I'm planning it out. I'm seeing the idea in my head. And there's certain things I want to make sure that I capture because it's important to the film. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It's for your eyes really only if you need to, and it's helpful. Bringing something like this on set and telling your subject, like, this is the kind of shot I'm looking for. Do you understand? And I'm going to have this where you're in the background and this, that. That's really helpful. Because remember, your dancers can't see the work like you see the work. This isn't like a studio where everyone kind of gets a sense of what the work looks like because they're in the studio rehearsing it and performing it, maybe without sets and costumes, but we're used to kind of filling that blank in. When you're on film, you might be asking people to do really random tasks or movements or shots that have no bearing on a larger sense of the work, especially if you're shooting out of order, you're shooting things like in distance, you're getting all kinds of odd shots that will make sense later. Storyboards are really helpful because that helps your dancer, your subject, get it. All right. It's going to be important as a director that you paint the picture, give them the context, tell them like how this shot's going to play. That's a lot of the communication that's really important as a director on set. I also have a shot list. All right. My shot list, again, looks pretty basic. All right. It's person and certain kind of things that I need to make sure I get, like a list of things that I need to get from each performer. So that's for me. And it's like a checklist. So I can make sure, okay, that needs to have that, needs to have that. This is the location for this shot. That's the location for that shot. It could be by person. It could be by location. Both is helpful. Having like a little master book for like all the details about the work is really helpful. But when you're on set, you want to be as clear and concise as possible and really get to the punch about what you need. So showing them a basic little storyboard or being able to really describe it accurately, having your own little shot list that you can do like a little checklist. I did that, I did that, I did that. And then, definitely leave time at the end of every shoot for some improvisation. Like, you're going to be on the set, you're going to be inspired. You might get a great idea. Maybe your performance or your performer has a concept or an idea. And when you're looking in the camera that day at that time, something might occur to you like, ooh, that's a cool, wait, let's get that. Like, that's some of the most fun stuff to do. And leaving yourself room and time for that, but making sure that you get your essentials is really helpful. All right. So also, you want to make sure that you get, I'm sorry, this like sounds coming from the warehouse. You want to make sure that you get enough coverage. Coverage means that you have, like, say, a particular shot of someone sitting in a chair and they do some action. You want to get good coverage, which means that, yeah, you get the shot from straight on because that's how you imagine that shot to be, but get some coverage for yourself. Shoot it from a couple different angles. Try it from a close-up of that, a far away shot of that, maybe an establishing shot of that, maybe a shot that moves around a little bit, maybe it's shot from behind. Getting a single shot and getting a couple different perspectives of it gives you some coverage. So when you're editing, you have some options because maybe you have like this really far shot and then you're going to edit it next to another really far shot. Oh, maybe you want to change it up and you want to put a closer shot there or a more personal shot, and you have that option, so now you aren't just stuck with one way to see that shot. You can play around with it. Getting great coverage is wonderful, and plan that in your shooting schedule. So it's not just, I have one version of each section that I need, and I have one take of each section. Planning for a couple different angles, a couple different perspectives, trying some things out, trying something more experimental. It makes the editing process a lot of fun. And when you have more options, you can allow more flex and play. In that same breath, you want to make sure that you get some B-roll. All right. B-roll is stuff that is not the main event, but filler footage, particularly if you're shooting something with your camera that is a single shot, like it's like one big giant take. If you don't want to be stuck with, oh, this whole shot was wonderful, but that little take where they, stumbled or they knocked something over and then it keeps going, darn it, I can't cut that out because it's like one big shot. You can always cut to B-roll. B-roll is establishing things in the scene or with the person, meaning that, like, say, for instance, I have someone just kind of hanging out at a table with a coffee cup and doing all kinds of stuff. And then as a B-roll, I get a close-up of the paper and the cup. I get a close-up of like some writing in a book. I get maybe a shot like from very far away of just the whole scene for a minute without anyone in it. Like, these are things that I can cut to in those moments, or a shot of another perspective. I can cut to these things. So if I have someone at the table and they're doing things and they accidentally knock something and I want to take that out, I could just cut to like the coffee cup for that second and then come back. I'm not saying that exactly, but that gives you an idea that if you have these little cutaways that still feel like it's fleshing out the environment and the details of the scene, that is very useful, because it's great as beginner and endings to work. It's great as little cutaways in between or scene changes. You want to get some B-roll. And what I usually do before a scene or before a shoot, or maybe while other things are getting set up, I see like just what's going on, and I just shoot some B-roll around here of, just like a panning of the table and maybe the corner of the chair, maybe the actor's feet, or maybe their hands just doing some sort of gesture. Like, I can get all these little details, maybe just a POV shot over their shoulder or something that I can edit in there as I see fit. So getting us a couple B-roll things is very helpful. I've always wound up being like, I wish I had more B-roll stuff of this. When I shoot like a percussionist over here in the space and he's playing, and maybe my camera gets a little wonky for a second, like I took an odd step, or like I got something out of frame, I've got some B-roll of just like the glimmer on the cymbal or like a pile of sticks. And I can always just kind of cut to that for a second, keep the audio going, and then cut back to the main event. It just helps set the scene a little bit, and it can help edit out some little anomalies or things that you don't really like in the shot, or some little mistakes. It's nice to just be like B-roll. So the last topic I want to talk to before we open this up for any Q&As that you might have is when you think of framing and composition, all right? So this is where you really get into how can you elevate your eye and the frame, which is your eye, on the camera. And with dance, for me, I'm not really going to shoot it like I would shoot a movie. I want to shoot it with the idea that there's motion in the eye and that there's movement to be had that kind of let the dancer dance around the frame. Sometimes I follow the dancer, and that there's this partnering that goes on, which is really the art of dance for the camera for me, is that I'm a dancer. So my eye is a dancer, my frame is a part of the dance. And that's what I really like. So I'm thinking about how you frame things and how things appear in your frame. We're going to watch some examples here in a second. Is really it really takes your camera work to the next level. So for right now, I'm going to treat my Zoom frame as my frame. All right, so I don't have to share awkwardly with my camera here. So when you shoot for the camera, don't think that you always have to have the whole dancer body in the shot, because that's what we're used to looking at on a performance stage. The whole thing. Well, this is camera. This is not the whole thing the whole time. And you're going to see perspectives that you could never really see, things obscured or revealed that are not contingent on a live performance. So thinking about my upper body, all right, I can shoot just my upper body just fine. But if I shoot it like this, see that much headroom I have? That's a big space. that can imply that there's up space and that there's negative space above me. Or I can also let my body fill up the entire shot where I'm even cutting her off the very top of my head. That's fine. If you look at a lot of close-ups in movies, they often chop the head off a little bit just because the person exists in the entire frame. Depending on how close or how far away, this kind of shot can read so interestingly, even though I don't see my whole head. So avoid thinking that you've got to capture all of what you see all the time. Things can dance off frame and be very, very interesting because our brain will find the connection and we will be zoomed in on what we do see. So if you wanted to capture something, now my webcam has a little bit of a wide angle lens here, so things get a little wonky. But if I just want to capture something here, I'm really paying attention then to this. This is the main event. It's not about seeing both my eyes or my legs or even my hands. It's about what do we see and where do we put the focus? And that's huge. So I'm a big fan of the upper body. I'm a big fan of shooting from the ground and like getting like the ceiling in the shot, very Citizen Kane. I'm a big fan of letting the dancer dance a little bit off the frame. When I shoot with amateur filmmakers, they often think, oh, I'm the filmmaker and I got to follow the dancer. So they're moving around trying to keep the dancer center all the time. To me, that's really boring. Like if the dancer's always center and always like in the shot, I don't get a chance to see them move around because if the frame is constantly keeping me in the center, it doesn't look like I'm traveling or moving. And that's such a beautiful part of dance. It's like spatial. So I want my dancer to be able to move around my shot and not always move with the dancer. So allow your dancer to move around. I've got a film here that I'm going to share. Let me see if I can share my screen. I'm getting so advanced with my zooming capabilities. So proud of myself. All right. So here we're going to look at a film I did in 2010. Turn it up a little bit. All right. Not so much about the volume of this. All right. There we go. All right. So let me open up the screen a little bit so we see. So here's a bunch of B-roll shot that I got. So I shot this film, and you're going to watch in a single shot in motion, like moving around, like a mobile shot, and then a single static shot that was shot from high up. So the mobile shot, I think I actually did 2 takes of it. This is choreography. So, you know, he did it the same time each way, which shooting improvisation, that's another thing. It's very difficult to match up a shot for multiple takes. But I was able to have 2 different takes of moving around. And then I had 1 take of the camera being up high and being sort of static the entire time. So let's go ahead and watch it. So this is B-roll. This was not a part of his actual performance. I got real close and like real zoomed in. I apologize about the quality. Apparently things when they're online long enough, the quality really degrades. But so I just had him writing, smoking the cigarettes, focusing differently on the book. And now we go into the handheld shot. So you can tell there's a little motion in the camera. I'm moving in. I let him dance off frame a little bit because this is the star here. And now I get to him and I let him kind of like, see, he's cut off here. Here he's centered, but now I'm going to slowly walk away to get a wider shot of what's happening. I let him move to different sides of the frame. So I'm still here, but I let him sort of like come in and out. Also, the main event is here. It's not centered. I let there be a little interesting composition. And it was a decision here to have a table and to have something else in the frame because otherwise it was going to be a lot of darkness in the background. And this just created some interesting non-centered view. If I put that dead center, I feel this would be a less interesting shot. So again, here he's mostly off to the side. We get a lot of this negative space, which implies that like this is sort of either directed somewhere or that there's something else mysteriously happening. He's not the main event. He's sort of talking and feeling and emoting about the main event, but here we have some nice balance here with negative space.
What the speedsters wanted and what they wanted was his eternal slowdown.
Let him get frame a little bit, just gentle moving. I let him just take his time to come back. And what's convenient is I knew the choreography, so I knew when he'd be coming back and traveling around. Here we go to the static upshot. So this shot is static from above. And what is really helpful to this is I wanted to create two different looks. We have the handheld camera, which was the shot just before this. And now this shot is a static shot. And what makes this convenient is that because I'm up higher, it feels like something different. It's more of like, here's the environment that this thing is happening. And then we go back and forth between up close, which feels a little bit more like I'm there and I'm experiencing it on his level. So the omniscient static shot feels a little more like this is the environment, and this feels a little more like the experience to me. And I go back and forth between the two. Here, he's not facing me. And I felt I wanted to see this just kind of like as a voyeur coming in and watching. So I needed him here, and I definitely wanted negative space here because he's talking about someone that's not present. He's talking about Charlie Parker here, and Charlie Parker isn't here. So for me, the subject, what I'm filming, is also what is absent. And in this particular piece, that's absent. Are you dancing toward the negative space? Are you dancing away from negative space? Are you directing someone here at this empty chair who's not here? I had to leave space for that. So that's this piece. It's available on Facebook if you want to check it out. Here's another work. This one is a single shot. There are no edits in this one whatsoever. And this was improvisational. There was some slightly directed ideas, mostly the beginning with the cigarette and just the general tone of like how I wanted them to react and respond to each other. But I put a little effect on this one afterwards to make it look like a nice noir-y film. But I let them, it's all upper body. At most, we get a little bit of a 3/4 shot, and I just kind of dolly in and out. So I let them compose the shot interestingly. So using the lighting, like who is lit more, who's in the shadow, I let them dance around the frame. And yes, they meet center many times, but then I also let them break away. I also let them go a little off center here. I'm not thinking about making sure that they're totally centered the entire time. I let her leave for a minute, half there, coming back, going real close in and letting these moments happen. So this is just done with a light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It's a very normal shot. You would normally see stuff in the background, but I saturated the colors a bunch and made it really high contrast. But I let them leave the frame sometimes. Most of their bodies is out of the shot. I let their hands leave. I let this languid dancing around the frame like they're dancing around each other, and the camera isn't anxious. A lot of times, what I call an anxious camera is quick movements. Oh, I got to get that in the shot. Oh, I moved. Oh, they're leaving. I got to move over here. Take your time. I let them kind of obscure themselves. I let them kind of dip out of the frame for a second. I let things be uncentered, and I let my camera take its time. And then you get a patient, like for me, a very sensuous kind of camera movement. Most of the movement is them. I'm moving around very little. They're in one place effectively. And I just let this kind of be where it is. So you get these great shots here. Like they both left and it was both about their hands. All right, what else we got here? I opened it up a little wider now. See all this negative space? It puts them in the corner. It puts them in a much larger context. And that was what I was interested in, is having them be this intimacy. And if it's up close the entire time, yes, I see their intimacy. But now if I move away, all right, here, they're way over here, I see the intimacy in the larger picture. So now it's a lot of negative space and they're having this little moment here. And that felt really comfortable and relaxed. And I let them kind of hang out off center here for like a while, and a slow walk in. You see how slow I'm walking in? You don't even really notice it. You just start to lean in. You just start to lean in. Yeah. So the last film I want to show you is something that was shot in a studio. All right. So let's see what we get here. So this was shot in a studio at Point Park University. This was a part of a piece I did a couple years ago called Pale Blue Jazz. And I didn't necessarily mean this to be a straight up dance for the camera as much as kind of an exercise for myself to shoot something that was definitely choreography and it had a narrative. So I wanted to sort of paint the narrative with the camera work. So if you see here, it's one big shot too. There's no edits in this. This is me. I know the choreography, so I'm able to walk around the choreography, and I knew where my camera could exist and not get in their way and not get run over. So it really was thinking like I am in the piece, but I really set up, are people looking toward the empty space, the future? Are they, so here we see they're looking somewhere, and now I slowly want to see where they're looking. And I bring it back to them again because their focus comes in. And I'm slowly walking away and rotating around. I am walking with socks on, so I'm very gentle. And I allow them to take different, so now they're becoming a small little unified group, and I move away and they just kind of get smaller and with each other. And I let them occupy less and less space in the frame. So I show their smallness. I wanted to show that. It's about being, you know, feeling small in the cosmos and also feeling connected to something much bigger than yourself. So I got to play with distance a whole lot with this piece. So here I wanted to show where they're going to go. So I put myself where they're going to go. They're going to start coming my way, and I'm slowly backing up to show the scope. I allow them to dance off frame sometimes. My focus is maybe on this person right here, and everyone else is sort of ancillary there. And then I bring it back to getting the whole group in the shot. And allowing one person to be in the foreground really creates some interestingness. So yes, it's a part of a group, but I really see one person's experience there. And I let one person be the dominant voice. I knew I can let them get really close. And then here, I wanted to show this footstep that they took, so it was important to me. And then I knew the piece went to them looking off into the future, so I took their point of view here. I see from their shoulder what they see, and I allow myself to slowly come around to what they see, to show space. So there was a space where I saw no one, and that's to imply distance and time. And way over here, there's others who are saying hello, like way across the cosmos. And now, obviously, this is just in the studio, but this was supporting the narrative of the work. All right. So if you notice, my shot is not level here. Nope. All right. Because there's a lot of vertical lines going on in this shot. And for me, I'm not a huge fan of shooting dead horizontal for everything. I like to play with the canted view. All right. That's the lens just going, all right. And cant it and then up is also a cool perspective. So go ahead and play with your perspective, because this line now creates interesting composition. So I show all of this distance, tons of negative space. The cosmos is big and the cosmos is very empty. And then I let them be tiny in the corner, because that, again, that support the narrative of the work. All right. So now I want to show about their little world here. So I slowly walk in. Man, I took my time walking in here. So this slow shot, I don't even notice the camera movement. If I'm looking here, and it's the only thing to really look at in the shot, I'm slowly looking and just kind of coming in, showing all these different little perspectives of things going on. Again, the person who I'm closest to is not necessarily my focus here. So I have someone off to the side. I have someone kind of half in the front. This person would be my focus, but I'm creating some depth of field. There's some different stuff happening. It's not everyone existing on the same plane. It shows that you're inside the work almost. So here I feel like I'm really inside the work because this person's in the front, but there's activity happening behind that person. I'm slowly panning around, letting new things enter the frame, letting them take their time. Here's a moment I really wanted to focus on. Boom. Yes. And I knew they were going to be traveling. So I'm like, ooh, I need to get my butt out of Dodge. I'm going to get run over soon. So I go down to their level. I can see the dance how I've never seen it. And I'm going to be like, so something's going to come up here. I know they travel. I choreographed it. So I'm like, all right, I got to be ready to move backwards in a hurry. So I want to get this shot the way it is. So here I start focusing on one person in a second. Give it a minute. I let this be about her for a second. There's other stuff going on in here, but I don't need to see everything all the time. Get used to that with the film. You don't need to see everything all of the time. This really feels like I'm in it. And I wanted to feel like, so I wanted to feel like the camera was another dancer. Where's the focus? Up. So I leave some space here. So see, this person is looking up. I don't want the frame to be like right here at the top because then there's nowhere to look. I wanted to give her a space somewhere to look. I want to give them the space somewhere to look. So I left some space up here this time. Now I know they move on this diagonal coming up. So I'm starting to give them a little space. My dancers understand not to run me over. And I let this long shot happen forward. Boom. And now I know it goes back. So I'm coming in with you. I am really allowing myself to continue to be moving, continue to be moving, continue to be moving. Here's my focus. Here's my focus. Here's my focus. My focus. Yes. All right. So you can really allow for this dance to happen. All right. So I'll stop my shade there. You can allow this play with the camera. Now, if you ever saw video footage of me doing this, it's dance. It's 100% dance. I am moving and shifting around with the camera and I'm utilizing my core and I'm stepping around smoothly and I'm just shifting down. That's all a part of the dance. And as dancers behind the camera, we still dance behind the camera. It is dance not just for the camera, it's dance with the camera. And that just takes practice. So you have these skills and things to think about and little tips and tricks to make your work more clear, how to be more organized on set, and really to trying to change the gear that dance for the camera is different in almost every way from the creator standpoint and from the person's performing than dancing for the stage, dancing for the studio, dancing for the I see you in real life thing. Dancing for the camera is its own medium. And the more you get into it, the more your brain can start imagining things that are impossible on a stage. I mean, we didn't even get into effects where you can fade and fade. No more scene changes. I can just change things like magic. There is a magic to camera that allows dance to embody the impossible. And I encourage everyone, especially in the current climate and circumstance, rethink how we experience dance, rethink how we can present our ideas, rethink how we can be creative in shooting our ideas. And this piece that I'm doing for Point Park University right now, it's about a 16-minute work for Dance for the Camera. It was shot on all different locations, some with me present and others with me FaceTiming in, mom holding the camera, and I'm the director here giving them direction in the moment. Planning, sharing clear ideas, telling people what I'm needing and how I need them to hold the camera and where it needs to go and what kind of shot I need. I just shot a work in multiple states that I was not in. And here I got the footage. It's what I need. And I'm able to make the work. We don't have to be present with our dancers anymore necessarily. And that creates access that we've never really had as performers and as dancers, that we can be creating work remotely and be together in a unified experience. And it takes some practice. It takes being able to articulate what you need so clearly, thinking about this as the eye, and what does your eye see, and how can we utilize the technology we have, including video calling on set and planning out your shots with some footage that you can share beforehand as examples, and looking at this as a wonderful medium that we can utilize, that's in your back pocket all the time. That's crazy. That's crazy. I did not start my career thinking I would always have my best camera on me at all times, and that I can be filming at any moment, at any time of the day, whenever. And now, even with the internets, if you want to look up a hack and some tricks and different ways to shoot and what you can shoot through and how to utilize a towel and pulling it slowly across the floor to get like a really smooth panning shot, hacks are endless. iPhone hacks for shooting with the camera are endless. Educate yourself, get curious, make your own ways of doing stuff. All of the things I shared with you today are just from experience. And there's just what I've done over the years that I learned, and that I learned by trial and error, or I just learned from doing it. And these are just my ways of shooting for the work. You might have some different ways and some completely different techniques that work awesome for you, and you innovate. We can innovate right now. You don't need expensive cameras. You don't need expensive equipment. And anything I've ever done with editing can mostly be done on free programs like iMovie, or even apps. If you don't even have a computer, you can do it all on the phone. You can do basic editing with free apps. The future. So I want to open this time up for any questions anyone might have. You can go ahead and turn your video on if you want for questions, or you can go ahead and put it in the chat right here, which might be even a little easier so everyone can definitely hear what you have to say. Let me turn the chat on so we can all, there we go. Everyone, the chat is now public now. If you have anything that you want to ask questions about, any projects that you're working on, any specific questions, or even ideas about something or thoughts. What software do you use? Jennifer says, what software do you use to edit the footage together? For me, I've always used Adobe Premiere Pro. It's part of the Adobe suite. It's a more complicated sort of professional level editing. You do not need that. In fact, I would go ahead and just say like 99% of what I use in Adobe is completely accessible in iMovie. And I've dabbled in iMovie a little bit, and it's got all the basics. You can cut, you can splice, you can fade, you can add some filters, you can color correct things, you can add titles. Very easy. I've seen full-length featured movies, like everything on iMovie with iPhones. You do not need paid material, and there's lots of free editing programs, like I said, for right on your phone. Like you never even have to take the work off your phone. Or if it's just easier to see it on a big screen sometimes, there's tons of free apps and editing software that you can get that you do not need to spend any money for. In fact, when you're just getting your toes started, the only things you really need to be able to do to create great work is to be able to cut your footage, add music or sound to it, or like overlay, you know, some sort of soundtrack or voiceover track or something. Basic color correcting, like making it black and white, or, you know, changing the brightness or contrast of it, which is every program has that. Add some titles. It's nice to have like a presented look where you have some nice titles that are going on. That's it. You don't really need anything else. Anything else is just gravy. And if you learn to do more things, that's wonderful, but 100% not necessary. I would say just get started with a basic free program. And before you even have your projects, just throw some random footage in there you have like from your phone, and just get used to like cutting it and editing it and moving it together and cross-fading things. just that kind of stuff. Learn how to get good at that. And like, once you know how to use all those tools really effectively, so just to cut, to overlay, music, titles, basic color correction, color correcting. That's all you really need. And you could make some really elevated, beautiful stuff with that. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any questions? Please feel free to ask. So, like I said, the big things for me about creating a project and being ready to do a project is being clear and having a plan. And when you involve many people in your work and you're taking people's time and locations and such, having a clear, direct plan is everything. You do not want to show up unprepared, not really sure what you're doing, not getting what you need, not sure of like what you're gonna need later. This takes a lot of planning in ways that, as dancers and choreographers, a very popular mode is like, I'm going to get in the studio and play around and see what happens and play with material. And we have these long rehearsal processes for just like noodling, you know, and it's fun to noodle. Don't get me wrong. But when you're shooting for the camera, you don't want to just noodle around forever. So while you want to get lots of coverage and B-roll and, you know, make sure that you get the shots that you need, you don't want to shoot mountains of footage because you're not really sure what you need. So you're just going to shoot a ton of it. I'm going to go ahead and 100% speak for experience that too much footage is not a great thing. If you have, you know, you had a shoot for, you know, a 10-minute film and you wind up with like 2 hours of footage, that becomes a bummer in the editing process. I've definitely had that situation where I'm shooting with someone and, you know, I'm telling them to get lots of footage for this whatever we're doing, and then I go back and they send me like 4 hours of footage. I'm like, I'm going to kill you. You know, just because that's a lot of going through and that's a lot of takes and that's a lot. You want to be efficient. So not so efficient that you don't get enough of what you need, but you also don't want to bog yourself down with like this ridiculous editing process, because that can really like sap the energy out of you of, you know, having some ridiculously arduous editing process to go through like so much footage. So that's just my tip, you know, don't go overboard. Um, if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to contact me anytime. I'm going to make this video available online, probably through my Facebook page and, you know, some other medium, I guess, at some point. And I might do more of these classes and break things up more and really focus on each topic a little more, especially framing and composition and getting some dancers here and showing you what I do. And I cannot stress this enough. Practice and play. Practice and play with what you do. All right. So think about, you're sitting at home, shoot your cat, shoot the leaves and plants outside, go outside and just do some slow panning shots. Get used to holding your camera steady. Get used to, when I say I have these like shots that have reinvented my idea of nuanced movements. If I'm here and I'm doing a slow shot, a slow pan shot, this is the kind of motion I'm using. I'm moving my camera, I swear. That takes practice. Just like anything else with our dance, just like any other movement we do that takes practice. Tiny, microscopic, nuanced, smooth movement takes practice. So the better you are at that, the better quality your work is going to be, the more elevated the shot is, the more fluid it is. And ultimately, when you're shooting something with your iPhone camera or whatever phone camera you have, you don't want it to look like a phone camera. You want it to look like a camera. And that is not a factor. It's about what your eye sees. It's about the composition. It's about how you shoot the subject. It's about the patience and nuance of the motion of the eye. That is what you see. You do not need crazy equipment for that. Even the iPhone 4, which was the very first iPhone camera, can shoot superior work. It's about the work, and that is what you want to highlight and focus. So thank you everyone for joining me on my first Zoom for the camera. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and more of these to come in the future, more nuanced topics, more in-depth dives onto some of these details. Thank you everyone. Have a beautiful weekend.